and welcome to the Sacred Rainbow Warrior. My name is Alistair McLean, and today we're talking about the sharing of the voice and sharing the vulnerability of sharing our emotions. So this is a really big one, and with everything that I talk about on my channel, it's because I have taken the journey of healing it myself. And when I've healed it in myself, there always seems to be an antidote that shows itself to me, and therefore I'm able to share that antidote. So one of the things that comes up very often for, especially for men, I see it in sharing circles, just see it in general, is the fear of sharing our voice. I've done a video on why men sexualize women, and it's very closely linked to this. It's about the sexualization of creation and how that is linked to the voice to do with life force. And I speak about in that video, and I tell a story of my own humiliation to help men and women understand why it's so difficult to share the voice. But in here, I really dissect everything that goes into the that fear and how we can overcome it. So if we talk about the fear of vulnerability at the moment, so imagine if you're in a sharing circle, and I've seen this. I've been in many sharing circles in the past where people have started to come into a circle and they've either just sat there quietly and not said anything, or they've said a few words but not really got anything out. And the reason that most of us find this difficult is from this fear of judgment, this fear of humiliation, or being perceived as weak. That's a big one for men, the weakness, and it comes from the projection of being, over emotional, being feminine, and it's really toxic. It's extremely toxic because the to in order to express your your feelings, your voice, your heart, you have to be willing to be emotional. And that's actually brave because you're accessing your heart and you're sharing your voice in front of others. And to be called weak for that is a projection of a person's own cowardice and weakness to not be able to talk about their emotions and instead share judgment and hatred. So I can understand if there's vulnerability from that because, in the past I have been shot down for sharing my voice, and it does create this closing of like, well, I'm not going to share my voice then if people don't want to listen. But it's about how you share. It's about speaking from the heart and feeling your own bravery and courage for doing that, and accepting that people are always going to have a problem with the idea of love if they haven't accessed their own heart. And if you look at my video on the Holy Grail night where I received the Holy Grail, you there's a perfect example of emotional expression. Perfect example of how I am not afraid to put myself out there and show my emotional expression. And it was difficult for me to put that video out. It was very difficult for me to start this channel. Like if you go back to my first ever video, I'm absolutely terrified. And why are we terrified? Why are we terrified to be on camera, to see ourselves? Why are we afraid to share our voice in front of others? And it always comes back to humiliation. Why are we so afraid of being humiliated? And it's really what it comes down to is that fear of humiliation is self-worth. Do we see our eyes, do we see ourselves through the eyes of love, or do we see ourselves through the eyes of not being good enough? And it's a very, very deep and sensitive wound because it's very much linked to the idea of innocence. And we're taught that innocence is something you have as a child, but it's something we're supposed to keep as adults, which is very rare. And if you've done any research into the gene keys by I forget his name actually, the Richard Rudd, yeah, Richard Rudd, the book on gene keys. There's one of the gene keys in there. I think it's number 3 is about innocence, the gift of innocence, and innocence is a very powerful shining light. And if you notice your own behavior over around people or children who are innocent, it provokes a reaction in yourself. And if you squint or react negatively to that, it's because you have that judgment against your own innocence. And so it's really important to understand that those fears of judgment and humiliation that you have against sharing your own voice, for example, if you're afraid to talk about your emotions in someone in front of someone who you've before you've even shared your voice, those are the judgments that are coming up internally in your ego to prevent you from sharing your voice. Those are the judgments that you have about yourself, and we'll go into more detail about that later. But what I want to say about the voice, like let's talk about the voice chakra for a moment. The higher meaning, I do this with the animals. There's a divine higher meaning. I always ask the universe for the divine higher meaning for something so that I can understand it at that basic level, and then I can open it up to see what it means. And the divine meaning for the throat chakra is sanctity. And sanctity is basically the temple of who we are. So when we speak from our life force or from the root, from the heart, we're expressing who we are, and that's extremely powerful. Now, on my journey of ascension, the more and more I've unlocked my voice, and my partner's further ahead on me on this, is it unlocks the hidden innate voice, the shamanic voice, and it doesn't come through in English. It comes through in an ancient forgotten language, and it comes through in vibration. And it's so powerful sometimes that when my partner does it, she can do it very easily. She feels like she's gonna in the past she's felt like she's gonna lose her mind because it's that strong. It's like taking a really powerful medicine and having a really big expansion, because it comes deep from the root, and it takes an enormous amount of work to be able to unlock that, because you have to heal the DNA. So the voice is extremely, extremely powerful. And if you look at the vibration of English, it actually holds quite a low vibration. It has loads of hidden spells in the words. And you compare that to a more passionate vibrational language like Italian, you use that in singing. In French, that's known as being romantic. But even if you think about Chinese, it's got lots of tones in it. And the more deeper the vibration of a language, the more meaning it holds. And so, for example, you look at the German language, they have certain words that have a bigger meaning, like, forgive my pronunciation of this, but Schadenfreude, which means to receive pleasure from giving pain to others, right? And we in English, there aren't many words that have that larger meaning. And the voice has that larger meaning, but it's supposed to come with the heart. And so when we go through this ascension at a higher level, from the basics of sharing our feelings, there is this hidden emotion that isn't acknowledged that comes through vibration, and you can sense it. You can sense it when somebody, before they've even spoke, they come into the room. And I'm going to do a separate video on this about psychic. Being psychic is nothing to do with the mind, it's to do with the vibration of the intuition. You can sense in a room when someone walks into the room if they're happy or sad, or they're angry, or if they're uh, I don't know, good, what's the word I'm looking for? If they're having a bad day, a good day, or if they come with a good intent versus an ill intent. And we can sense that vibration, just like as a character walks in the movie, you go, oh no, they're going to be like this, or oh yeah, I look forward to that. These are the vibrations that we don't acknowledge. And these are the vibrations that help us understand our own vibration, because we're all mirrors. Now, with with that in mind, I'm going to express through my vulnerability different emotions. So if I right now I was being really serious and direct, and so you may have judgments against the seriousness or the intensity of my eyes, and those are the judgments that you have against perhaps your own intensity or your own seriousness. So it might be asking me to relax, to lighten up, and those vibrations may be shown to you. But if I get really angry, then you might have judgments against anger, like, oh, he's a bit angry. And that might be that hidden anger that's showing itself through you. So these are the vulnerabilities and vibration and judgment that start to show up in the ego. So you hear these in the voices in the head. And if I start being very gentle, you might feel compassion for me or kindness. And again, these are showing the vibrations that are in you. But if you have judgments against how I sound right now, mirror those against you, back to you, like that. Or, for example, if I start using different accents, like, let's just not be so serious about this all the time. I mean, come on now. Now, you might have judgments against, oh, he sounds stupid. So, can you see? Can you start to see how those judgments that you're afraid of come through your own judgments? Or it might be, oh, he's always messing around. He's not serious enough. I'm not going to take him seriously. And so there's judgments against joy, there's judgments against expression. And again, these are all mirrored back. So you can start to see how that shows up. Yeah, so I've got some notes here. I'm just checking on them. So sexuality of the voice, we spoke about that. But let's talk about the reasons why people feel vulnerable. So I've spoken about humiliation, and I give the example in the other video about sexualizing women, how I was humiliated sexually when I was a young kid, and that locked part of my voice, that locked part of showing who I truly am. And again, I link this back to sanctity, the voice, because if we're afraid to show who we are, then we can't turn up in life. So we start leading a different aspect of who we are. So if we can't show up as ourselves, then we're living a lie and we start to judge ourselves for that, and we start to get stagnant and start to express toxic behavior. So expressing our voice, how we see fit, or how, from a place of love, is extraordinarily important. But the difference is learning how to speak from a place of the heart versus the ego. And we can go deeper into that. Another reason people feel vulnerable is judgment, and this comes from a place of grandiosity and preaching. So I did on my video, my He Lives podcast, I did my latest video about the Jaguar, and the shadow of the Jaguar is about judgment and control. And judgment comes from a toxic place of grandiosity. Grandiosity is a form of narcissistic behavior, which originates actually from believing you know better, which is, imagine you're on your trajectory of your healing journey, and you're learning so much, and you want to share it, and you want to share it. And then someone else comes along and they say something that triggers something you haven't healed in there, and you realize that you haven't healed that or integrated that. And so you tell them, oh, that's not true. You get beneath me. That's narcissism, because it's linked to laziness. It's like, oh, I've stopped on my journey. I'm just going to tell you what I believe it is. I'm going to tell you that I know better. So that's this pedestal energy. Instead of looking up to each other, we put people on pedestals. Like I speak about that in the Jaguar video, how we in after in the discussion, I talk about how I put shamans on a pedestal. Most people do that. They put shamans on a pedestal. As soon as you've done that, you're done for, because we're peers. We look up to each other. We don't put anyone on a pedestal. We don't put ourselves on a pedestal or anyone we look at on a pedestal. It's about looking up to each other. And one of the reasons we're in so much, there are so much toxicities in our society is because we've stopped doing that. And you can tell when there's true friendship between two people is because they look up to each other and they support each other. So another one is social conditioning. Like I said, men are taught that sharing the voice is weak, and women are told that they're over emotional. And crying is actually a really important part of opening the heart. and it does come in alongside sharing the voice sometimes. I say this in so many videos. Behind the scenes, I call myself to my partner. I call myself the crying Freeman, because it's a character, but it really helps me feel my heart when I'm crying. It helps me open my heart, and it helps me feel like I'm actually in my body. So that's a really important one. There's also that, the masculinity, the bravado of it's not tough to talk about your emotions or to share them, but it's such an old paradigm. I mean, come on, let's move past that. The other one is the lack of emotional awareness. This is a really big one. When I first started to look at myself and to realize I had an issue, I realized that every time somebody asks, well, how do you feel? I go, I don't know. I don't know how I feel. Can't you feel your heart? I don't know how to do that. And it was really intense because I've become so dissociated, desensitized to who I am, that I had to take a journey. And I started seeing a professional to help me identify my emotions and mirror that back to me. And so I started to identify when I was feeling shame, apathy, depression, all these lower negative emotions, so that I could identify them, clear them out, and then get to the higher emotions of courage, faith, joy, willpower, and love and enlightenment, and so on and so on. So another one as well is this is one of my I really dislike this one, is concerning about burdening others. So these filters that we have on ourselves when we're afraid of speaking the truth, of hurting other people. It's such a lie, and we hesitate to share what we really need to share, in case we hurt the feelings of somebody else. And I'm not saying when we're rude, I say when we're speaking the truth. And if somebody takes the truth as offensive, that's not your issue, that's their problem. And it's really about standing in your truth without censoring yourself and saying, well, that is truth because I'm speaking from love. And I'm not speaking about opinion here. Your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth. That's not the truth. I know that's a paradox in some ways, but the truth is love. And love can sometimes sound really confronting because it's triggering. And, like I say, if you have judgments against me, those are the judgments that you have against yourself. If that triggers you, that's something to own and look at. But if you take offense to that, then that's because you are not taking responsibility for your triggers. So you can see how that might affect somebody from sharing their voice because they don't want to trigger someone, because if they trigger someone, that person might judge them or say something nasty to them. When I first started this channel, I did a video on toxic masculinity. You will not believe some of the comments I got. I had to remove them because they were disgusting. And they haven't even watched the video. They just saw the title of it. But the title was about overcome. The title didn't express correctly, perhaps. The content of the video was about overcoming toxic masculinity through my own experience. I wasn't judging other men. But this is what happens when people get triggered and they don't know how to identify the wisdom that triggers hold. They fire that bullet at someone else instead of firing it at themselves. And when I say bullet, I mean the ego bullet, the spiritual death, the ego death. This is how we're supposed to grow. We keep destroying the ego to remove it out of the way so that we come to wholeness. And if you look at my video on integration, what is integration? I talk about this because integration is about the healing of separation, and anything that is separation is fear, and anything that leads towards wholeness is love. And so it's all about that. Another reason people fear speaking up is past experiences. So yeah, if you've had a negative past experience where somebody has mocked you or like I said, humiliated you or dismissed you, or a really big one is being gaslit. That's really toxic. That's a symptom of narcissistic behavior, and it can have a really traumatic effect on the person. So we'll talk later about building a safe space to overcome that. But remember, all of these past experiences do not mean that they're going to repeat. They're creating fears as like a wall for you to overcome that, and you have to overcome that in order to free yourself. Because if you cannot share your voice, then you are enslaved to censorship. And this is something that I'm seeing more and more in society at the moment. Why aren't people speaking up? Why aren't people sharing their voice? Some people are, a lot of people are using AI instead of using their real voice. And I'll give you an example of people not sharing or speaking about their anger at the moment, right? They're spraying, they're spraying the, I'm not going to swear, but they are spraying the Jeffin skies at the moment. Why aren't people angry about that? Why aren't we angry about that? I ask myself that. Why am I not losing my shit about that? And it's because of what they're spraying in the air. And spiritually as well, it's like they've put this blanket of comfortability and ignorance over the whole world to stop people from claiming their own justice. And that is eventually going to lift soon. And there is going to be this huge realization of like, oh my gosh, what have we let happen? And it's really sad and frustrating that people are afraid to share their voice because of the censorship that is out there. And I've done several videos on censorship. You can check those out. It's because it's a really big problem in society at the moment, and people don't realize the extent of censorship that's out there. It's ridiculous. I mean, I heard recently that people are being arrested for stuff they've written on Twitter, right? So that your life is threatened, your freedom is threatened just by speaking. Can you hear? Can you feel how ridiculous that is? This is where society is at the moment. Something's going to have to break. Something's going to have to change. There's going to be some kind of revolution because this is like, the thumb that is being pushed down on society, on humanity, and something's going to break. I tell you that something is going to break. Okay, another thing, communication skills. Okay, effective communication. The lack of skills of talking. Yeah, this is a big one. Okay, so for example, someone who has a stutter, that might be that will be extremely difficult to share your voice. And there are, people that professionals you can work with to overcome that. And I know one of those is singing. So singing is a great way of, if you can't speak, is to sing. That's a really good one. But again, that comes up with a lot of fear. But communication skills, if you haven't been taught them, are something that need to be developed by being around other people and listening, and to not judge yourself to be lesser than them, but just to judge that perhaps you weren't taught those lessons and how to develop those skills. So if I had poor skills of communication, which I did in the past, I I took courses. I would speak to professionals or study online courses to take responsibility for that so that I could grow. Because what I always say is that without responsibility, that toxic behavior will just continue to sit there and you won't be able to overcome it because nobody's coming to save you. I know it sounds rough, but nobody is coming to save you. You have to save yourself. Check out my video on the second coming. Okay. Another one is relationship dynamics. Okay. So, yeah, if you're in a toxic relationship and somebody is influencing your emotions or your voice, then you need to get out of there. And I've done so many videos on this. It's the toxic relationships, and understanding what makes a great relationship is all about being able to share your voice free of judgment and humiliation, and blame. Blame is shame, and it's not welcome. So the idea of overcoming that is by being hollow and holding each other accountable for their own responsibility. I do this with my partner where instead of making an accusation, I sit down, I ask her, can we have a sharing today? And she'll say, yeah, I've got some free time. And then we did this every day for 1,000 days. And then we had to, because we went inside so much, and then we had to come out. So now we do it less because we did it so much, because we're able to now communicate better. So this could be actually what I'm speaking about now is a lesson on communication skills. She would say, okay, let's meet at so and so time. We would have some cacao and we would sit opposite each other and say, look, my ego is making me believe this and think this about you. Can you help me understand this? And the judgments I then would mirror against her, and she would mirror them back to me, and then she would have her own judgments, for example, and we would share them as hollow. And we would always start with the main rule, which is it's personal, but it's not personal. Meaning it may sound personal, but it's not coming from a personal place. I don't blame you, and please don't take it personally. And this takes an enormous amount of training. I offer coaching on this. Check out my website, thesacredrainbowwarrior.com. And this is coaching for an individual or couples. Another one is mental health issues. So yeah, I went through all this. Autism, CPTSD, bipolar, narcissism. Oh, the list is endless. ADHD, all these symptoms and behaviors I used to fit into those categories, and I was told that they're impossible to heal, which is absolute nonsense. And I went on a journey to heal those. And most people sit in those and they feel comfortable in them and identify with them. I've spoke about this before, how a lot of people will create a handle on like Twitter or Substack or something, and they'll put, you know, an acronym after it, like ADHD or CBDC, like turn it into like a hero behavior, hero worship, and then they attract those people in the tribe who also are attracted to being in that toxic behavior, and it's horrendous because it's hero worship of the ego. It's disgusting. And for me personally, when I received my diagnosis, at first it was such a relief because it's such a double-edged sword receiving a diagnosis. Do you cling to it like a victim, or do you go, oh, okay, right, that's a relief. I knew there was something wrong. Now I've been identified with it. I will look at the symptoms and I will take the journey to heal that. And that's exactly what I did. And so if you do have mental health issues, know that you can cure them, know that you can overcome them. And if you need help with that, again, I offer coach services on that on my website. Speaking from the heart, let's talk about that. So when you speak up, the voice heals. When you do this, it's so profound. I'll use myself as an example. So one of the things I had to overcome was my fear of speaking in public. So what I did was I put myself in a position where I had to. It was the first video uh, that I did about the Lions Gate. If you look at my most popular videos, it's got the most views. But I did it, I think it's only got about 6,000 views on my channel, but I first uploaded it to my sister channel, Prophecy Walkers, and it almost went viral. It had 183,000 views. And I that was something that I channel wrote. And before I turned it into a video and put it online, I actually went and stood in front of an audience of I don't know, about 50 people, and I stood in front of a microphone on my own on a stage and I read it out. And I had tears in my eyes when I was reading it, and there were people in the audience that came up to me and were shaking my hand. But before I went up on stage, I could feel my heart open and this portal opened, and I felt this divine light come down because I knew that I was going to do it, and I was doing it as part of my integration on my medicine journey to overcome the fears and vulnerability of sharing my voice. So the rewards are huge when you take that journey step by step to overcome that. And that was a really safe space for me to do that. And I'm really, really lucky and fortunate and extremely grateful that that was received in that way. And then when I put it online as a video, I did not expect it to be received so well. So it was a really, really great reward for me to saying yes to love. That was me sharing my voice from a place of deep love. That was really me showing my vulnerability by sharing my gift with the world. And that's how you can see it. If you're in a circle, and this has happened to me numerous times when I've shared and I've shared my emotions, I get two or three different responses. One is other people start crying because it's so healing for them. So you are healing others by showing a gift, or somebody looks at the floor because they can't handle it. That's happened so many times. They're just like, oh, they just can't handle it because it triggers them so much. Or there's the person that gets jealous, which is also unfortunate. Now, jealousy is them not being able to see that I am mirroring their own greatness. So if you think I'm great, that's because I'm mirroring your greatness. If you think I'm a complete asshole, I'm sorry to say, but you're mirroring the fact that you are also an asshole. So that's how it works. That's how it works, right? So let's talk about safe space to heal, right? Like how can you feel safe to share your voice, right? Now, one of the examples I give in a few videos is joining an online sharing group. That there's one called for men. It's free. It's an international one called Men Who Talk, and I used to go on there, and there were to share because I was living in the countryside, and I had no friends, nobody to speak to, and so I went on there to share to get my emotions out of me to display them, not to dump them on other people, but to acknowledge them. And then those mirrored reactions that I would get from other men would really help me understand better who I am and that, not being so hard on myself that I'm actually doing really well. And I thought that, my journey was really difficult and it has been difficult. But when I started attending these spirals, I don't like to call them circles because that means people are just going round and round, but spirals where we elevate. When I started to attend these, I started to feel a really humble energy from myself because I saw some of these men. There was one time I came on this call and this guy was just about to commit suicide. He wrote his letter and everything. And so the idea then was for someone at that stage of their life is they just need to be heard. And so there was a listening and a deep acknowledgement. And he continued to come back after that, which was so beautiful. It really brought joy to my heart. But there were so many people on there who'd lost loved ones who were just really in a terrible place. And it made me think, gosh, I'm in a really great place compared to a lot of these people. So it can be very humbling. But these people, what I found so amazing about these men was that they were going through hell and they would say to me, Alistair, you're doing great. What makes me emotional talking about it because, like, human beings are just amazing. Just amazing. Someone could be going through absolute hell and they've got your back. It's absolutely amazing. This is what I'm saying. If those guys hadn't have said that to me, I wouldn't be able to receive that healing. So it's your duty to share your voice. Okay. So another way we can build a safe space, like I said, is with your partner. If you're on your own, then that doesn't apply. Find a group, right? And it's not about just grabbing someone. It's about finding someone who really has your best interests at heart and knows how to do this. You know, I found when I've after psychotherapy, I started going to group spirals, and some of them were quite toxic. And but in those spirals, I found people who I did identify with, and one was a woman who was a shaman, but also a psychologist. So she had those both worlds, and she was able to mirror back to me all the toxic behavior that I was showing in a really kind and deliberate way. And I really appreciated that because I wanted to know that. I wanted to know so that I could heal that. And I did this group session with me and five women, and I had all these judgments. I'm going to give you a really powerful example now on how judgments are so completely useless. They are so useless unless you know how to use them for healing. I was sat with five women and we did what was called group session work, which is where you share in a group and then you ask the others how that made them feel. Now, bearing in mind, I was completely outnumbered by these powerful women, but I didn't have a problem with that, right? Because I grew up always having this respect and reverence to women, which most men don't like. And this woman who I didn't know her. I just met her, but I'd met her at a ceremony once, but I didn't really know her. and I won't use any real names here. But she said to me, I have just met a man and I have something I want to tell him, but if I tell him, I'm worried that he'll leave me because of the judgments he may have against me if I tell him. Can I can I mirror what I want to say to him to you? And then will you tell me how that makes you feel? And I was like, yeah, sure, sure. She goes, I'm an escort. And I was like, wow, I didn't expect that. And she started telling me, uh, yeah, she was an escort, and without going into details. And she said, how does that make you feel? And all these other women are looking at me, and I'm like, okay, I'll be honest. You're my worst nightmare. I think what you're doing is extremely against your own integrity, and I don't agree with it. I find it disgusting. But I said that in a really respectful way. And she said, I thank you so much for being so honest. And then I also asked her, I don't understand why you do that. Please, can you tell me? And so she said, yeah, thank you for being so honest. And she said, the reason I have become this is because my parents sold me when I was a young age to people at sex parties. And 2 weeks before that moment, her brother had committed suicide because of that. And so then my judgments just looked ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And so I said to her, because it brought me to tears, I said to her, I apologize. These aren't the exact words I used, but I said something along the lines of, I apologize on behalf of me as a man from what has happened to you. And it is the first time any of the women in the room had ever heard a man apologize for something that essentially wasn't their responsibility. But because I am a man, I took responsibility for that. And everybody started crying, including me. That's a really powerful example of using integrity of voice by taking a stance of observation of your own inner judgment and saying, "This is my judgment," instead of saying, "You're disgusting." Yeah, can you see the difference there? And that really changed my life that day. So I thank those women for that, but that changed my life. And you can see there how a safe environment was created by saying, I want to hear your judgment and I'm not going to react negatively towards you. So I hope that really helps. Um, you can also create your own group. You know, you can create your own online group, or if you know some people who work in that kind of arena, you can create one. But there's loads of groups that you can join. And if you don't want to do that and you have a partner who's open to doing that, then we offer guidance on that. I offer guidance on that. There's so many different ways you can do that, but it's all about creating a safe environment. And obviously, you can work with a psychotherapist, a professional. There's what I did, which was really interesting, is I worked with a psychotherapist from America because when I started working with plant medicine, I realized that a lot of them over there were doing integration psychology because it had been legalized in certain parts of America and they were doing psychological testing with MDMA and ketamine and microdosing with psilocybin. And I found that really interesting. And I started to get um, some good feedback, but eventually I started to take my own journey. But that's a really, there's so many different options, and you can just, you can contact me if you need more options. And this all leads to when you start sharing like this and you share from your depth, you're fostering emotional openness. And it's not about sharing everything. You have to find that discernment, learn about discernment, and not be hard on yourself when you overstep your own boundaries or allow somebody to overstep your boundaries. Discernment is about learning what to say, when to say it, how to say it, and how much to say. And for me personally, I go deep. You've probably noticed I go deep and I go high. and I don't apologize for speaking my truth. I have learned to speak with integrity. It's been a long journey. Of course, I made mistakes. I was part of the toxic patriarchy, and I said horrendous things. But you can't keep yourself in the past like society brands us. You know, it's like once you're branded as doing something, you know, they try to frame celebrities for something, you know, they dig up their past and you say, oh, the when he was 14 years old, he said this word, so he must be a bad person now, even though he's 50 years old. It's like, what? It's, you know, they did that with Kevin Hart, and people grow, and it's about allowing people to grow, allow yourself to grow. Judgments are useless. Let's talk about how not sharing your voice can impact your relationships with, you know, partners or family or children. It starts to build up like a pressure cooker. And I'm not just talking about anger here, but toxic behavior, narcissistic behavior, toxic shame avoidance. If you're not finding a safe outlet to express who you are, to express your voice, to express your feelings, your emotions, your fears, whatever it is, your anger, then, or your brilliance, expressing your genius. If you're not finding that, where's it going to go? It's just going to build up inside. And if it doesn't get to express itself, it comes out in toxic behavior. That's going to affect all of your relationships, your job, a girlfriend, boyfriend, daughter, son, mother, father, cousins, whatever. It's going to affect all your relationships. But most importantly, it's going to affect your relationship with yourself. And that's terrible. Because when we don't express who we are externally, we find it difficult to express who we are internally through the internal voice, and through internal feeling. And I was taught as a child, if we talk about how the voice impacts us, I was taught through, you know, being a young child and learning from my parents. I learned from my father to absolutely crucify myself if I said something that was out of line. And that was how my father treated himself. And these are things that we can learn uh, through no fault of our own from our caregivers and our guardians. And it takes a long time to overcome those if we don't acknowledge them. And it's it's sad because we can see if we look at how it grows from a child upwards, on how if your parents don't know, haven't healed their own wounds, they are going to pass them on to you. And anything that is not love leads to toxic shame, which is narcissism. And I go into so much detail on how everything links, everything that is negative, everything that is not love, it originates from that. It really is the root of all toxic behavior. And the long-term effects of suppressing your emotions, I've seen it. It's so dangerous, so toxic. It can really lead to violent behavior as well. Like, you know, a lot of people, a lot of men, let's say, use the outlet of martial arts, boxing, whatever you want to call it, um, to get that anger out. But it never fully does the trick because it's internal. And I'm not saying it's not beneficial. It's absolutely beneficial. It's incredible. I took that journey myself. And the the what is missing is the internal expression of the heart. Because if there's a constant punching of trying to get the toxic behavior out of you, it's because you're not acknowledging the opposite inside you. You need to also acknowledge the kindness, the compassion, the intelligence, the 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 just the wonder of who you are. And like I said, if you don't have that opinion of yourself, then you need to start sharing in front of other people because they're going to mirror that back to you. Like, I bet you won't expect, you know, you feel like an a-hole or however you feel, and you go in and share, and someone says, "Wow, you're amazing. Thank you for sharing." And you're like, "What? No, I'm not." Yeah, you are. You're brilliant. And that will happen. That keeps happening because if you start sharing who you are, people are going to say, wow, you're brilliant, because people are going to resonate with you. The people that don't resonate with you, they'll take their own journey. You have to take your journey. Everybody has their own journey. So at the end of the day, if you really want to understand what stops you from sharing your voice, it's about mirror work, right? So here's a strategy for improvement. Whatever you fear, and I said this earlier, whatever you fear is what you see in yourself, right? So if you fear that you are going to be punched in the face for speaking up, then that means when you were a younger child, you were punished for speaking up, for speaking your truth, right? So this happened to me. I had a very violent upbringing. When I spoke my truth, expressions of love, I had my ass kicked. And so it was very difficult for me to learn to talk again, to express my sexuality. And I really recommend you watch my video on why men sexualize women, because it's not about talking down on men. It's not. It's about my experience of overcoming why I sexualize women. And I always come from my own experience. So it's a really, really powerful video that shows my vulnerability. So if you want an example of that, listen to that video. So mirror everything back to yourself, and you can just write them down. Like journaling's so powerful. If you write down the judgments that you have for sharing your voice, start looking at where those come from. If you don't know how to do that, meditate on it. So, say for example, or see a psychotherapist because they'll teach you how to do that. But for me personally, it was I remember someone used to say to me, "Where does that come from?" And I'm like, "What the hell does that mean?" And I'd be sat there meditating, going, "Where does that come from? Where does that come from?" What it means is what memory comes up, what emotional anchor created that behavior. So, if you have, let me think of one. Uh, I'll just use the one that I did in the video, right? I I I found that when I tackled my fear of sharing my life force, my voice of who I am in full vulnerability, I kept getting stuck and I couldn't find speak. And so when I sat with someone, they said, "Well, what memory comes up?" And a memory came up of me being humiliated by a woman for having an erection, but I didn't have an erection. I was only 8 years old, and she humiliated me for that. And at 8 years old, that's devastating. It'd be even devastating than being an adult. Imagine, like something out of a movie, all these people going, ah, ha, ha, like that dream where you wake up without your pants on. It's all about humiliation, right? And so overcoming that and just acknowledging that was enough for me to go, oh, right, that's where it comes from. Okay. And you can do that with any wound. You can ask where it comes from. A memory pops up through feeling, through hearing it, or through a vision or whatever. And then you can say, oh, right, that's where it comes from. And because it was created then, that means you can uncreate it now. So I hope that helps. And this is all about creating resilience and growing. It doesn't happen overnight. And the coping mechanisms you can use to deal with that are, meditation and sharing your voice. So if you find a group that you feel comfortable with, like I said, I worked with loads of groups, but the last one the last group that I spoke into, which is part of my spiritual initiation to embody humbleness, was Men Who Talk. Because when I went on there, there were people who I would say 99% of the men on there hadn't started their spiritual journey. They were in a really dark place. And it really helped me see where I had come from. And so I was able to share my wisdom and help others, right? And this is how it works. When we grow, we turn back to our ancestors, or we turn forward to our descendants, the people who are coming behind us or who are walking by our side, and we say, "Hey, here's my hand if you need support." And this is how it works. So you can become a mentor too. And You know, there are other forms of growing resilience to the emotionality of your own behavior towards yourself, but it's not always, I would say 9 times out of 10, the fear you have of how somebody else is going to treat you is all internal. If you really think about it, how many times have you been hurt compared to how many times have you hurt yourself, right? And so it's all about coming to understand who you are, what you are. You're a divine being. How does that work? What does that mean? Take the journey with it. Create your own journey. If you don't know how to do that, again, I offer coaching services. Just check out my website. And if you don't know who you are, the journey of learning who you are is fantastic. You may think you know who you are, but you're not. The society puts us in this box, like I said, this blanket as well. And there's so much ignorance around who we believe we are because if we're not following our dreams, if we're not looking at ourselves in a light that is anything other than brilliant from a humble place, then you're living a lie. And there's anger and injustice attached to that. There's so much work to do. But we're all in this together. We're all in the same planet. We're all in the same boat. And it's about not comparing yourself to others, but looking up to each other. We all have something to offer, you know. I've got friends who I look up to, and when I say that to them, they, you know, I met like I'll give you one last example of a brilliant man I know who had been through absolute hell, and he'd never heard a good word said about him, and he's in his 50s, and I said to him, I go, I think you're amazing. I look up to you, and he's just burst into tears, and he said, No, I'm not. I'm worthless. And I said, You're not worthless. If I can look up to you, then you can look up to yourself. So, like I said, we're all going through it. We can make it fun if you choose to. There is a lot of fun involved, but it's difficult. I am not gonna lie. It is difficult. Everybody's going through it at the moment, and there is a dip before coming out. But the truth is to never, ever give up. So I hope that helps you. And if you have any questions, please comment, like, subscribe. But if you have any questions or you would like me to do any future videos, just pop it in the comments. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.